He turned his back to the stands, the boos roared, and for a second the whole thing felt smaller than a game. A human reaction. Hot and stupid and immediate. Geno Smith flicked his middle finger toward a section of Raider Nation as he jogged off the field. A gesture that landed in a clip and spread faster than any post-game explanation. By Wednesday, he was standing in front of microphones saying three words that, in pro sports, are almost always the right ones. I apologize, and then explaining why. First of all, I would like to apologize, obviously, to the fans, to the fan base of Raider Nation, he said. I made a poor judgment out of frustration, and that's not an excuse. I've got to be better than that, and I've got to hold myself to a higher standard. In that moment, I didn't. I'm sincerely apologetic and very sorry, obviously, for doing that. I just want to make it known that those things will never happen for me again. That's the script we've seen before. A raw moment, a viral video, and a public mea culpa. What changes from story to story is the context. And here, the context is ugly for Geno and the Raiders. He was sacked 10 times in that game. 10 times. 10. In a single night. The Browns were relentless, and the scoreboard read 24-10 before the Raiders trudged back to the locker room. When a quarterback gets flattened that often in one night, the gesture starts making an odd kind of sense. It wasn't a moral failing so much as a pressure valve popping. But that doesn't excuse it. Fans pay tickets, follow, invest emotion, and the visual of a player flipping them off sits like a splinter. The team responded with a statement that was predictably firm and disappointingly brief. They're disappointed, they discussed it with Geno, and they take Raider Nation in the highest regard. Translation: this is serious, we're handling it, and we expect better. This isn't Geno's first time in the awkward post-game lane. Back in August, during a preseason spectacle involving a Seahawks fan and a crude sign, he made a similar hand gesture. That incident, too, became a talking point. At the time, it drew attention and even an on-field reaction from then Seahawks coach Pete Carroll, who tried to ease the heat. Now, it's added to a growing pattern that feeds a narrative no player wants. Good plays, bad composure. We should also be honest about the bigger storyline here. This season in Las Vegas has been a grind. Geno Smith arrived after 3 sturdy years with Seattle and a surprising run of football that reminded people of the QB he once was. But through 11 games for the Raiders, he's posted numbers that don't quite match the narrative of renewal. 2,367 yards, 13 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. And the sacks, he's been dropped 41 times so far this year, a punishing stat that tells a larger story about an offensive line that can't shield its signal caller and a team that's struggling to find rhythm. Last Sunday was a brutal punctuation mark in a troubling trend. So when Geno lifts his hand in frustration, it's not just raw emotion, it's fatigue boiled into gesture. It's a quarterback who's been asked to withstand an impossible commute, hit after hit, and the crowd's reaction, boos that stung before the game even began, meeting him at the tunnel. It's bad optics and bad timing, and surely something he regrets. Saying sorry is the first step. Living differently is the rest of the road. What happens next is both predictable and important. The Raiders said they've discussed it with him. Teams usually follow that with internal discipline. Sometimes a fine, sometimes community service messaging, sometimes both. More important is what the club does about the structural problem. 10 sacks in one game isn't just a personal failing, it's a unit problem. Coaches will rewatch protection schemes, evaluate personnel, and likely make adjustments on the line or in the play calling to keep their QB from becoming a human piñata every week. There's another layer here for Geno, too: reputation. An athlete's brand is fragile. One night of profanity aimed at the crowd won't erase past goodwill, but a repeated pattern of public lapses chips away at the benefit of the doubt. For teammates, that's awkward. They want a leader who owns mistakes and steadies the locker room. For the franchise, it's another distraction in a season where wins have been rare and patience thin. For the fans, it's personal. You feel insulted, then you hear the apology, and the relationship is put on a short, awkward leash. But let's not pretend the headline is only about poor judgment. There's a root cause in the tape. When pocket collapses are weekly and sacks pile up, even the calmest veteran phrase. The Raiders are 2-9 for the season. a record that breeds frustration in players and fans alike. Geno is a 35-year-old professional still trying to lead, still trying to marshal an offense that scrambles far too often. The team's statement and his apology will close the chapter in the press, but the real work is on film, the one place where blame can be distributed and solutions can be found. And there's room for forgiveness if the response is genuine. He owned it publicly, repeatedly, and promised it won't happen again. That's the start. The more meaningful follow-up will be measured in small things: how he carries himself at practice, how he answers fans in community events, how he prepares on game day. Teams, especially those trying to salvage seasons, tend to handle such moments internally. A private punishment, some rehab, and then last best hope that the player learns and the team tightens up. It's worth noting the cyclical nature of this sport. One night you're a hero, the next you're a headline. Fans will forget, or they'll forgive, if the product on the field improves and if the player shows contrition that lasts beyond sound bites. But if the sacks keep accumulating and temper flares reappear, patience will evaporate quick. Football fandom is long on memory about losses and short on tolerance for repeated spectacles. So what should you take away? First, the gesture was dumb and avoidable, and Geno knows it. His apology was necessary. Second, the underlying problem that made that moment so combustible is the offensive line and the team's inability to protect their quarterback. Fix the protection and the gestures are less likely to happen. Third, culture matters. How the Raiders respond, quietly and constructively, will tell you whether this becomes a storm or just a passing squall. One image will stick from this week: a veteran QB, face a little bruised from the night, heading toward the tunnel and flipping off people who pay to watch him play. It's ugly and it's human. The better story would be the follow-up: the quiet meetings, the changed protections, the apology met by real improvement. That's the fix everyone wants. Fans want performance, quarterbacks want protection, teams want both. Until the tape reflects change, frustration will keep bubbling up, and sometimes it will show. Geno Smith apologized on Wednesday after video surfaced of him flipping off Raiders fans as he walked off the field following Las Vegas's 24-10 loss to the Cleveland Browns. A raw, public moment of frustration after a brutal afternoon. "I made a poor judgment out of frustration, and that's not an excuse," Smith said, adding he has to hold himself to a higher standard and that it won't happen again. Las Vegas Review-Journal. It was an ugly game for Smith and the Raiders. He was hammered repeatedly, sacked 10 times as Cleveland's front turned the line into a clinic, and Las Vegas managed just one late touchdown when the result was already decided. The loss dropped the Raiders to 2-9 and extended a painful skid that has made the season a long slog for players and the fan base alike. ESPN.com. The team didn't ignore the incident. The Raiders released a statement saying they are aware of the gesture, that they're disappointed, and that they discussed it with Smith. "We hold Raider Nation in the highest regard and take this matter seriously," the club said, which is coach speak for "we'll address this internally," while acknowledging the optics of a starter giving the bird to paying customers. Fox Sports context matters here. Smith was booed all afternoon at Allegiant Stadium. Fans let him know how they felt during introductions, and the frustration built as protection collapsed and drives stalled. This isn't Smith's first brush with that specific stew of emotion. A similar incident in Seattle during the preseason earlier this year put his patience on display. But repeating the same misstep in public puts a premium on accountability. Teams ask stars to absorb heat, not return it with gestures. Las Vegas Review-Journal. The on-field story is grim for Las Vegas. 10 sacks in one game is a catastrophic mark for any offense and a direct symptom of protection breakdowns, schematic problems, and execution failures. Those kinds of beatings accelerate organizational decisions, and Vegas made one of those moves hours after the Browns game when they fired offensive coordinator Chip Kelly, a sign the front office wants answers fast. Southgate Smith's apology was succinct and to the point. He accepted responsibility, called it a lapse in judgment, and promised it won't happen again. That matters because a repeating pattern of antagonistic interactions with fans and the media damages trust with the locker room, with the coaching staff, and with a fan base that already feels betrayed after too many losses. Saying sorry is the first step. Rebuilding trust takes consistent behavior and better results on the field. Las Vegas Review-Journal Pete Carroll and the organization now have to balance public discipline with internal support. Coaches often defend players publicly while handling consequences privately. That's likely here. The Raiders said they've discussed the incident with Smith, and the team must now figure out whether this is an emotional outburst deserving a fine, a meeting, or simply a mandate to be better. And then pair that with schematic and personnel fixes to stop the on-field hemorrhaging. Fox Sports. For fans, those apologies only buy so much if the product doesn't change. Apologies are worth